Gentlemen, you are both drunk on cosmic wine.
Welcome to the show. I'm Dr. Mark Sylvester.
And I'm Dr. Richard Schulman. This is Alt Psych.
Wow, I'm glad she let us know that. Happy Friday, Rich.
Happy Friday, brother. It's good to see you.
It's good to be seen. Although I literally saw you in real life and not just the electronic version of you, the Max Headroom version.
So which one is more real, the real one or the one on the
It depends.
Nanoparticles?
If we're living in a matrix, it would depend.
As long as they have Stanley Cup in the Matrix and in reality, I'm good to go, because the bolts are in it.
Well, and the good news is the full capacity seating. The pandemic's over. You heard it here first, folks.
Hey, we went to the game on Wednesday, and it was amazing to be. It was really interesting, and since we're going to be talking about reintegration post-COVID, we're playing the Montreal Canadiens, so people from Canada were down, and there were a few people wearing masks in the stadium. Not too many, but they all had Canadiens jerseys. So I don't know if that, because they're still, very, it's not over in Canada, I guess, where it is apparently over here. It was a full stadium. People had a great time. Nobody seemed to be worried, and not too many people had masks on. And maybe people, I don't know, because we got gypped out of it last year, they were making up for it this year. It was great fun, and we did win, so that helps too. Yay!
Winning is good. Winning is good.
Yeah.
Well, we joke the pandemic's over. I think it's a good message to put out there for people's mental health, but the reality is this is a virus that's with us forever. So, it added to the sea of things that we forget about that are out there that can kill you. So,
but first, before we die,
on that positive note,
a mental wealth tip.
Kick us off.
Okay. The mental health tip for today has to do with over-explaining.
Mansplaining?
Over-explaining.
Over-explaining.
We may do that as men, but people over-explain. Over-explaining is a trauma response. Believe it or not, it comes from a deep fear of abandonment or rejection. So if you catch yourself over-explaining, you may want to look at other things. You don't need to do that. And that's the mental wealth tip of the day. Do you feel wealthier?
I do feel wealthier, and I will pass that information.
You don't need to explain it.
I will pass it to my friend. I have a friend who's interested.
So are you reintegrating post-COVID, Mark?
Since day one, we talked about this indirectly. When it began is when the whole
you're talking about reintegration or the COVID itself?
The problems related to human interaction as a consequence of the restrictions during the pandemic. And we talked about it about a year ago when social distancing became the parlance of our time. And we were really concerned, mostly me, because what I observed is social distancing was being equated with psychological distancing, which is very illogical.
Well, I don't know how logical it is. We weren't allowed to cope in our usual ways.
No, but I mean, they say, okay, socially distance, stay 6 feet away from somebody. Okay, well then why did people stop making eye contact at Publix? And, why?
I don't know why.
Why did people get totally fearful of other humans as fomites?
Because you were dangerous if you were breathing. That's why.
Yeah, so social distancing immediately became psychological distancing, which play the tape through now, and we mentioned it back then, but now here we are a year later, self-fulfilling prophecy, and we're all disconnected and isolated. And we tried to talk about this early on, but people just did not realize the trauma that they were about to endure. We talked about right away, the government says, oh, hey, we're going to shut down for 2 weeks, no big deal. We were like, no, this is a 3-year course. All pandemics have been. So I think that it was better in some ways that people didn't know what they were getting into, much like medical school, but it was worse in that it was an ongoing stressor, like a divorce. When is it going to end? This has been dragging on for years. And in came the mental health problems.
I think of it more as a trance state, actually. People were hypnotized. There are four reasons why people go into hypnotic trance. There's confusion, frustration, repetition, and trauma. I think we had all of these in the psychological response to the pandemic, and there's no wake up. I'm going to count to five, and you'll come back to ordinary awareness. People are still walking around in a trance state, is my belief, and they have to wake up.
Yeah, and we talked about a lot of the political unrest. Would it have been the way that it was if it wasn't during a pandemic era? We definitely saw an increase in violence, both against each other and ourselves. Self-harm through
Oh
depression,
yeah.
suicide, substance abuse increased. I think the biggest thing is, one, people didn't realize the trauma they were about to endure, but because of that too, there was an equal shock now that people are aware of their own discomfort when trying to socialize again. And it's both confusing and surprising, and what we're mainly talking about, and how to process through it, because you're not going to be able to get into your therapist until 2024. So this is the best you got. Just keep watching it on a loop.
There you go. Go watch it on a loop.
The link.
I wonder if there was more social discomfort pre-pandemic, and this just allowed people to normalize, say, oh, well, this is where we're supposed to be more distant, as opposed to forcing themselves to interact. I've had a number of patients who went, hey, yeah, I feel pretty comfortable with this. This is what I like. I don't want to interact with anybody. Of course, for a lot of people, that's how we cope.
Introverts definitely had an easier time with the social distancing.
Yeah.
The other addicts who had an interesting course, because there were three types of addict responses that were unusual because of the pandemic. One was, it's a stressor, they were ill prepared, and they crashed and burned and relapsed, and death and dismemberment. Two, they're in good recovery, they have tools recovery. Part of recovery is learning how to live life on life's terms when things like, pandemics happen, and they were better equipped, kind of accidentally, well, not accidentally, but the social isolated introverts were accidentally well equipped, but they had tools of recovery that they could utilize. As one of the gifts of recovery is, when something like this happens, they know how to ask for help, when to ask for help, when, what it looks like when they need help. And then the third thing, a lot of addicts found it better for their recovery, which is kind of intuitive, because the program is a lot about connection and fellowship and service and all that. But a lot of people noticed there was less pressure to go to social events like weddings and cruises and places where their recovery might be challenged, or they're exposed more. So that was kind of interesting, this population as well. But I mean, it's time to exit the COVID cave, no doubt about that. Not only for our economy, our mental health and well-being, but also for society at large, because it's as over's going to get. We're going to see a spike in the fall, and this, that, and the other thing. But
like every other respiratory disease.
Absolutely, and we can no longer be prisoners of fear. What I worry about, and what do you think of this? I didn't put this in our notes, and I was going to bring it up at the end. What about permanent damage? I mean, one of the reasons we pulled my kids out of school was mainly for my middle child, who was kind of going through the normal childhood OCD stage.
Yeah.
And I was worried about the germ phobia cementing a permanent fear of struggle for her whole life. And I'm glad that we did, but what's going to be the long term? Are people going to be permanently warped from PTSD, from germ phobia? There's a lot of people that are still masking and scrubbing their groceries down, and how do you think that behavior is going to extinguish, or is that a permanent sequela of this era?
Well, number one, permanent, I don't know about, but is it significant? Something we need to look at? Absolutely. There's going to be skyrocketing. I hate to be the doomsayer, but I can't help myself on this. How many people picked up alcohol and drugs during the last 18 months? We won't see,
Non-addicts and alcoholics.
well, they may be in the future. We won't see the full effect of this for 5 years, maybe 10, because it takes a while before the real addiction, for it flowers. It's progressive illness. What I see is I worry about the kids.
Yeah, me too.
I think the masking kids is child abuse. I think it's terrible. The kids are not at risk for the disease, and they're not super spreaders either. There's tons of research on this, yet kids in school have to wear masks.
And no one is thinking about the mental health consequences for the
My
kids.
God, the kids that don't learn how to read facial expressions, for example, which is key to sort of interactive life, but just the fear that you're going to hurt somebody because you're breathing, and the idea that they have to wear masks when they're not at risk, and they're not really spreaders. It's an abomination as far as I'm concerned. And we're going to be dealing with this in the future. I think the only thing good I can tell you is people like you and I are going to have a lot of work.
Yeah, we didn't need the work.
We didn't need the work. Hopefully, there'll be more openness. And this sounds like I'm being a little self-serving, but I don't, we have plenty of patients, but there'll be more openness about therapy, because everyone's going to need it. It's not going to be, oh, well, I'll give you something to cry about, or, there's a real openness that we're all kind of freaked out about this. And what it reminded.
How do the people know when they need therapy?
Well, that when they don't function well. Yeah, there's, I would say just go. Everybody needs it now. I'm reminded of what one of my patients, who's now in recovery and he's doing well, he said, I realized that you were right when it was 10 in the morning and I was in a fetal position with a bottle of vodka, but I don't think we quite have to get there. But I think if your relationships aren't working, you're having anxiety, you can't sleep, there's a whole bunch of sort of garden variety symptoms that we have to take a greater look at now, because the new normal is not normal.
Because and it's going to be a process.
It's a process because there have been restrictions, not just on our freedom to move around, but really on our freedom to think critically, and self-expression. Asking questions, it seems to be frowned upon, and we can't be fully functional psychologically in a way that, I think of health as, and I've said this before, as a robust experience of life. Health is not an absence of symptoms. We could say, oh, well, we survived this pandemic, but did we have a robust experience of life during it? I mean, I think you and I probably did, because we were kind of at the front lines of this thing. Well, I think for a lot of people, staying in your basement was not exactly the most robust expression of life.
No, but they were told to do it, and they were not told what to do to preserve their mental health during that time. Mental health is still really not at the forefront, and that's why we're going to make this video go viral and see if we can get it above 7 views. But one therapist credo is, when we stress, we regress, and we've all been under that stress. The fascinating thing, and I've told a ton of patients this, is no one thinks that the pandemic affected them that bad. Everyone's like, yeah, the pandemic thing, it didn't really affect me. But, I'm having problems with my marriage, And I'm stressed out because my kid isn't working. And it's like, well, okay, your kid's not working because of the pandemic, because they were laid off, and your marriage is stressful because you've been home at each other's throats. And so it's all connected to the pandemic. And to me, it's surprising how many people are completely unaware, even when you point it out, that you're not an island. If you've been living on planet Earth, you've been feeling the stress of society. It's like you said, doggy do hanging in the air. The scent and stench is everywhere. You cannot go anywhere without that tension and stress and anxiety and fear and uncertainty and confusion. I mean, it's everywhere.
And conflict, the
Conflict.
well, the thing of it is that there's the Stanley Milgram experiment where we do what we're told, even though we may not like it. So that when they told the guy to turn the pain dial up, he did it. He may have protested, but he still did it. We've been told a lot of things that don't make any sense. Okay. And there's this division kind of happening in the society. There's a lot of people whose relationship with loved ones have broken up as to whether or not they're going to get vaccinated, or if they want to wear a mask, which I think wearing the mask is, that's kind of a ridiculous thing to debate about. There are more important things, as to what are the long-term effects of either of the COVID, of vaccination. What are the long-term effects of not treating this thing right away? When in medicine did we not treat things early on? It's incredible to me.
Yeah, it's very reactionary. And we talked before on the show about um, uh, when this first started, other things that you could do, other strategies at home for kind of the mental fitness. And a lot of people didn't do that because it was hard to work from home without bringing your work home. It was hard to get out in the world without leaving the house mentally. So, I mean, it kind of feels like we're all Russian orphanage babies. We
Yeah.
haven't
Oh,
touched
yeah.
each other's, that we've had this disconnect. We have these emotions coming up that we're not really sure where they're coming from. It's really a time for self-reflection right now.
Well, absolutely. And the thing that I noticed personally, I'm I cope by doing things. I like to go to concerts, to go to sporting events. And, as big Lightning fans, we didn't get to go to the Stanley Cup last year and they won. Now, I went to the game the other night. It was extra crazy because it was like all the people that wanted to be there last year, I think, were there living both things, both years of playoffs. The frustration that people were feeling was really evident in how excited everyone was to be at a full house and do something that seemed normal.
Well, and they forgot how to behave. In researching this for the show, I found a ton of articles about how even, news people are noticing that there, where there were like, I don't know, 12 fans or something that stormed fields, it was 250 now.
There was
and people throwing drinks on the players.
They were spitting on players. I mean, not the hockey players because they hit you with the stick.
They do that.
But basketball, they don't have a stick. So seriously, the people throwing things. Somebody was in New York, spat on Trae Young, who is my new favorite basketball player. Totally inappropriate stuff.
No, and it shows the culture and the mob mentality, and kind of not only the pandemic reactivated latent traumas and stressors, but the reintegration itself is a learning curve, and it's something that as a society we're going to have to take slowly.
Well, at risk of placing blame, which I don't usually like to do, we had a lot of people, our so-called leaders, telling us to be afraid when this thing started. We don't have them telling us how to reintegrate now. We don't. They keep pushing the fear button. No. You still, even if you get vaccinated, you need to wear a mask. and you still have to socially distance, and you can still get the disease, and you can still give the disease. Where's the idea that, a lot of us have had this thing, we might even be immune to it? Um, I saw an interview that one of these talking head, like us actually, they were interviewing some woman who said that she had had COVID and she wasn't going to take the vaccine. The interviewer very indignantly said, "Well, how do you know how long your immunity is going to last?" And the woman just didn't blink, said, "How do you know how long your vaccine is going to protect people?" There's so much uncertainty. And so what we're doing is rather than saying, "Hey, listen, we've been sick, we got well, this has happened, I don't know, 47 times in my life. It's going to happen now too." Instead of that, it's like, no, 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 you better be afraid.
Here's a $60,000 question. Will it get worse before it gets better? I mean, we're coming out of when I always use the analogy, when a car pulls out in front of you and you get that stress, it's only after you kind of pull over and are detached from the situation does the emotional centers
Yes,
turn back on. So
absolutely.
are we going to see a similar thing as a society now that COVID's over and everybody's like, get back out and do your thing? Are the emotions going to hit people? Is it going to get worse before
It's
it
a
gets
great
better?
question, and I don't have the
Thank you.
answer because it could go one of two ways. One is yes, it could, but the other one is this: there's an operant conditioning kind of thing going back to my old behavioral grad school days. If you take a mouse and you put it in a box with an electrical grid on the floor, fire the grid, the mouse jumps out of the box. Now turn a light on. After it does it a couple of times, it knows the shock is coming. Now turn a light on 5 seconds before the grid goes off. After a while, the mouse is jumping at the light. Now remove the grid. The mouse is now scared of the light, not the grid. You know, I don't know that we're scared of the disease anymore. We're scared of being scared or something like that. We're scared of the pundit going, "Now you better stay scared because we got a new variant coming in 20 minutes and you're going to get it." You know, there's this idea that somehow we have to have zero disease in order to be free of this, which is that's insanity. That's not going to happen. But on the other hand, as a species, we seem to have survived pandemics in the past. We have better technologies now to do so. Um, but what you do is you put a clear lid on the box. So when the light goes on, the mouse jumps and it bumps its head until it realizes the shock isn't coming. I just don't know what that lid on the box actually is in our society. And that's what the reintegration is all about. It's understanding that you can go out there and maybe you're not, maybe it's going to the game and nobody dies.
Well, what you're talking about really is neuroplasticity, which we've talked about
Yeah.
before. And our own biology is working against us because our brains learn threats really quickly. Um, they unlearn threats much slower. So we had a threat very quickly, and we all got our attention. It was an ongoing, continuing threat, which is a sort of a chronic type of a trauma as opposed to an acute one, which is generally worser.
Right.
But it's going to take a while to unlearn that. And maybe some people are going to need more long term, serious professional help who have been the most severely impacted. The ones that were maybe the opposite of introverts and really require on social interaction for their own health and well being. I've talked on the show about how living in Miami was hard on me because of that.
Well, I mean, I guess when all you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. But when I got to we went to a playoff game in the round before the finals, and they had about 15,000 people in the stands. When I got in the stadium, I wanted to cry. I was overwhelmed with the
That's
emotion
the
of that, and
emotion is
not
coming in.
because I was afraid of getting sick. It was just the idea of seeing all these people again, and doing something that I loved doing. We went we went a year without seeing live music. I
And
mean,
we're social beings, absolutely. No man is an island, but the reintegration is going to be a process, and we're going to give some specific tips on it. But it's kind of interesting that people unconsciously, I think, are starting, one, to recognize the surprise and the confusion of reintegration, but two, they're reaching out and I got people with high level education going back to work at a gas station, and unconsciously they're doing that for their own mental health, to fight off boredom, to help the reintegration, to keep something more simple and maybe menial without the pressures that they were feeling, before the pandemic happened at work. They were already overextended. And so there's that shell shock piece of it. And I wonder about people that are, one of the comments I keep hearing people say, and this is in Florida mostly, is nobody wants to work. Nobody wants to work. And well, that's because, they blame the president, and they're sucking off the teat of the government. And it's some usual, political statement. And that always kind of irritates me a little bit, because I don't think politically. I think, interconnectedly. I think emotionally. I think psychologically. I think behaviorally. I think sociologically. I think a big factor here is people are scared and not ready to go back to work. And so a big chunk of the workforce is still missing
I would agree
because
that, and
literally reintegration problems.
it also occurs to me that we live in Florida. The people that I know in California are far less removed from the pandemic. I talk to people in California and New York because I have a lot of friends there. They think we're nuts. They expect people in Florida to be lying dead in the streets. Almost, people have been angry at me that I wasn't more afraid. You're not being responsible. Well, I'm not dead yet. The bottom line here is that you and I and people in Florida have had an experience not nearly the same as people in other parts of the country. And I think in the world too, depending on where you live, in the UK and Australia, various places in Europe, it's been far more draconian than here. And I think that's going to take longer for people to recover from. The fear levels are greater. The repression is greater. It's kind of like,
The trauma is greater.
getting out of a concentration camp or a prisoner of war camp or something.
Jail, sure, same phenomenon.
How to reintegrate. There's all kinds of. I think it's not just emotional, literally neurological things that happen when you're confined like that.
Well, look, we've all put on the COVID-20, right? Our bodies have changed. They've slowed down. We've gotten lazy. Why are our minds or our emotions any different? Our mind has gotten 20 pounds overweight. We carried along baggage. And now we're facing going back to the mental gym and trying to perform at the level we did when we were less round. That's that's a problem. And let's offer some damn solutions here. You ready? You ready for some tips?
Absolutely. And it's going back in the basement is not one of them, right?
No. We got to exit the COVID cave. Do we have any music? Can we cue some music? Okay, here are the tips. Number one. Actually, I'm not even going to number them because I'll lose track. Everybody's got to go with their own pace, right? Every single person will be different, even if they weren't, this person was an extrovert and this one was an introvert and this one was already working from home and this one's a jet setter. Everybody's going to be different logistically, but also we're all different creatures and we process trauma in different ways and stress. So be aware of that. Do not compare yourself to anyone else. You agree? You concur, Doctor?
Don't compare yourself. Okay, I concur. Well, isn't that what we do with everybody anyway? People come in for therapy. I'm not going as fast as the other guy. How do you know how fast the other guy's going? I don't know.
Well, you see that at a funeral too, right? Like, well, this person over here is all crying and mopey and wearing black, and this one's really quiet, and this one's celebrating the life and is more gregarious and seems insensitive.
Yeah, and
That's
who
a
put
good
the and
example.
I just want to know who put the fun in funeral. That's kind of odd that that would be that way. But anyway, it's just something I think about. Absolutely, and you see it everywhere. We see it with our patients. They're supposed to get better at a certain rate. Good luck. Anyway, what's number two there,
Here's
Mark?
another tip. Imagine before doing. So we're so reactionary in our monkey mind that this is a awesome opportunity and a helpful tip and requirement to visualize how this is going to work for you, what it's going to look like. Imagine the process. Be aware where you're at. Visualization and imagination is going to be really helpful. One, it gives you a sense of control, which we've all had threatened and lost. And so, any place we can reclaim that control and kind of take baby steps to find our new comfort level. And who knows, maybe some people's will be even better because of other things they've learned during the pandemic. But control is a big thing, and visualization, imagination are really helpful and important to do that. Even making lists. Well, yeah, that's coming up on another tip here too. But
Well, but I mean, it's in any kind of activity that involves performance. Visualization is very helpful. I've done a lot of sports psychology, and that's key of what you do with athletes. And also, part of the visualization process, if we take the sports psychology idea, is you have one kind of response when it works and one when it doesn't. That you reinforce when it works and you flush it when it doesn't.
yeah,
And
but aren't we at like a pre-contemplation phase right now? Like, okay, I'm going to think about quitting smoking. I'm going to think about getting back out there is where I want people to start.
the thing of it is, there's a lot of behaviors already in the repertoire. I don't think too many people stop going to the grocery store, or stop getting gas for the car, or whatever. The issue is, how did you feel about it? And what did you say to yourself about it? You say, oh, well, I'm going into Mad Max now, and I beyond
Beyond
Thunderdome. And
Thunderdome.
yeah, I knew that would get you. And I think the trepidation that some people had, and once again, I was, believe it or not, attacked by friends of mine for not being afraid enough. And I said, I don't think being afraid really helps. Just don't be stupid. Um, but people are afraid. So how do you deal with any fear? You talk it out, you visualize it, you go step by step, and you do it. And if you can't do it, then you come talk to one of us, and see if you can figure it out.
Yeah, there was a subsection there that I'm going to gloss over, but well put. Um, my next tip, I guess, I'm going to tee up based on a point you made before, which was kind of the social unrest and a lot of the changes. We did a whole show. I was really super proud of it. Apparently, I'm the only, I don't know about the only person, but I was surprised that I was surprised that it turns out social media is the decay of Western civilization. But when everyone's locked in their COVID cave, guess what happened to their screen time? Boom. And we went from one proverbial social drink to six. And so, next tip, you gotta detox from doom scrolling. Step away from the social media, get back into real life. That is, I can't, that's probably the biggest tip
Doom
because we're,
scrolling.
thank
Let's
God,
see if we can find something. Oh, I found it. There we go.
cancel all your accounts. It's interesting. I didn't know exactly what I was doing, but I killed my television about 15, 20 years ago. And the reason that I did is I sensed it wasn't good for me, which sounds kind of stupid and trite in retrospect, but it was almost like a harbinger of social media. as I watched it kind of decaying and going down, I realized, one, this isn't feeding my soul. It's not worth my time. And on an unconscious level, I think I knew it was harming me and cut the cord. Haven't missed it one day since. I know
I'm
you're a hockey fan, so you might
I'm
struggle
just,
with
well, I
that.
watch sports on TV still, but I stopped kind of watching TV because I found it so boring. It
Yeah,
just,
to me, it
it
wasn't
was,
about boredom. To me, it
it's
was, I
complete.
knew that it was shrinking my soul and sucking
Oh,
it through my eyeballs.
you're more evolved than I am. I just got bored with it, and it didn't, you know, it was like, it was even beyond eating non-nutritional food. It just was, it didn't taste good. You know, I
See, I
just,
was unaware of why I was doing it, and with the gift of hindsight, especially with the birth of social media and watching how it's negatively affected everyone, um, everyone, the reach of it and the growth of it is just still staggering to wrap your brain around.
well,
But
I
a
find
little
that,
bit here and there isn't bad. But go in your COVID cave, and everybody's been doom scrolling.
well, that's the thing, that you have to have other things to do to cope. And, you know, our lives have been very busy. Who has time for it? I have so many projects I want to clone myself, but I wonder if you don't have those kind of interests or those kind of projects. We're working on music or writing or things you can do in your basement. If you really, the default position is Facebook. And there's also that intermittent reinforcement thing, you know. Uh, okay, that's dumb, that's dumb, that's dumb. Ooh, that's good. That's stupid. Oh, what an idiot. Oh, that's so, and you never know when the interesting thing is going to come. So you keep going, you know, because what else was there to do? And I think
Yeah, and
there may have also been a physio, like a dopamine response when you found
yeah.
something, or the zing you got from, you know, y having those, pardon my French, having those Facebook balls and getting in somebody's face and saying things you'd never say in person. That, you know, and there's a adrenaline surge that comes along with that stuff, you
Which you
know.
need when you're laying around eating Cheetos 24/7 for a year and a half.
Yeah, that'll do it. Boredom, big deal. And you know, my boredom theory is that boredom is based in anxiety anyway. Um, and if you stay with boredom, what do you get? You get restlessness. Stay with restlessness, what do you get? You know, you get irritation. Go down the list. Eventually, you get anger and anxiety, um, because you really don't. The anxiety is based on, you don't feel like you're connected to anything. You're not connected to people. You're not connected to the planet. Um, this experience drove people, I think, into their trauma, into their anxiety. In a way, it drove them deeper into themselves. But the problem is they couldn't be authentic with it. You know, we lived this situation where we were isolated. We were forced to go away from the things that distracted us. But how do you get really authentic at that moment? And, you know, I think maybe some people did. A lot of people came back to therapy. I had patients show up that hadn't been around in a while. And people, as we talked about, people stopped canceling, you know.
Yep.
Um, but
People
then,
looked forward to their appointments a lot more than I've seen, which is great.
so then the idea of facing your own goobers because there's nothing else around. Well, well, you know, you don't want to face it. You know, they never did close liquor stores.
No, their sales boomed.
It's essential.
Never was a supply chain problem there.
Uh-uh. And you know, there never was. I just think about, you know, what you were saying regarding substance abusers and how they coped. Um, you know, a lot, for a lot of them, the loneliness piece was big when
Hmm.
people couldn't meet in person. But you know, I wonder if that was sort of true across the board for people who are just sort of garden variety neurotic, that, they didn't have extended family, let's say, all kinds of groups. Human beings are pack animals.
Well, here's another tip.
Go.
Make a list of things that you're excited to do. Keep your eye on the prize, focus on the positives. So say self, what do I want to do now that the pandemic's over? Where do I want to start? What brings me joy? What's going to, let's not go back into that super stressful business meeting, high stakes, let's say, you know what? I want to go canoeing, or I just want to be outside with nature in a park and walking and not be in a rush and be able to stop and talk to people again. Whatever it is, as long as it's not doom scrolling, make a list, and almost like affirmations, really, and focus on what you're excited to do. And that will kind of help get the ball rolling, because we all know starting piano lessons, starting going back to the gym is the hardest part, getting the momentum going. And making a list of things you're excited about can help that process.
I've been encouraging people to look for beauty everywhere. We live in Florida, and there's so much beauty in terms of plants and flowers, and we have the sky, the beautiful skies. And I say, look over there. There's a window in my house. Look out the window. What do you see? Oh, there's a palm tree.
I see my wife walking by. What is she doing? Is she robbing us? She's moving furniture.
Okay, well, there you go. There you go. Okay.
Add that to the list of things you're excited to do. Move furniture.
If that floats your boat, it's okay with me. Some people move furniture to kind of rearrange the energy in their home. I mean, you could do that too.
Absolutely.
Shake
Shake it up, because your imprint from your life during the pandemic, maybe you got computer cords and lights and stuff like this dragging all over the place. Clean it out, change it up. Like you said, move the furniture, repaint the walls, do some aromatherapy, something that changes the flavor of your environment, so your brain gets a kind of a visual cue that we're moving on to a new stage. Literally think of it as a new chapter.
Well, reintegration, that's an interesting word, because it could be self-integration, or it could be integration into society again.
Or both, in this case.
And I think that one depends upon the other, that you have to, kind of make peace with the fact that you're going out into the world again, and that, look, you might get hit by a bus, okay? The idea that somehow we're never going to die, we're never going to get sick, we're never going to die, that's something that we have to actually look at, because people are so scared of getting sick that they don't want to live.
Yeah, and
I mean, I made my decision. I'm going to live. I don't want to be stupid about it, but what's the point of just surviving?
Well, and ask yourself that: am I living or am I surviving? Am I looking forward? Am I frozen in the past or frozen in fear? Check in with yourself.
This is not so, in my world, it's not so different from treating any other kind of trauma. I mean, I work with trauma all the time. I just see this as another trauma, but it's specific as a trauma because everybody's got it. We all live this. Whether you had a family member that got sick and died, or you watched somebody get sick and died, or you just saw it on TV. We live this, we live the restrictions, we live the uncertainty. And I think that one of the things, when I used to train therapists, they say, oh, well, you have to be okay with ambiguity if you want to be a good therapist. Guess what? Now we all have to be okay with ambiguity. Yep. Because we're not, we're in a kind of in a battle for reality here. We don't know what the reality is. One pundit says, oh, well, it's going to be a couple of years. You're still going to wear a mask, and doesn't matter if you're vaccinated or how much vitamin D you eat. And another one says, well, this is just a bad flu, and you'll recover if you're young and healthy. There's a battle for reality. We're
Well,
not
and
sure who we're going to trust here.
you're gonna trust yourself, I think, and
Let's
listen to
hope so.
your
I
own
think I
wisdom.
think
And
most people don't.
no, they don't. But you got to be your own gatekeeper right now, which brings me to be open with yourself, open with your family, open with your friends, open with your colleagues and coworkers, so that they know where you're at. Be patient with yourself and other people. We're becoming more self-centered, self-seeking, and be very selective in what you do. Anyone asks you to do something social, say, am I ready for that? Do I know how to say, I really appreciate the offer. I'm slowly reintegrating. Ask me again down the road. It's not the best time for me. I've kind of overextended myself this week. So again, you have to know where you're at. You have to visualize and promote that sense of control. The selectiveness is a sense of control, and know when to ask for help and seek support, whether that's professional or from your employer.
As this pandemic unfolded, and you and I really, in a way, had a front row seat for the emotional reactivity of people. What occurs to me is that it's almost like we were thrown in at the deep end, where you really were going to face your fears of life, not just of COVID. You're really going to have to face any of the traumas that you went through, because it was going to be activated. And now you're going to have to face the idea that you can't stay in your basement forever and have a robust life, and that people are depending on all of us. Everybody has a responsibility to get back to life in a sensible way, because we're not, we talked about social isolation. Social distancing is really social isolation. We're not supposed to be socially isolated. It's very rare that people do well being socially isolated. We're pack animals. It's our responsibility to get over the psychological trauma and be with people again.
Well, and the one thing, focus on the positive. I'm always, I guess it's a cognitive reframing technique, a glass half full, half empty thing. But let's be grateful that the pandemic reminded us of the critical need for socialization, for human interaction, for
Right,
connection to
right.
each other. I was blissfully ignorant of this myself. I thought I knew myself. I had no clue until I was put in a situation living in Miami where I had that normal social pattern input that I got here in Sarasota taken away from me, because you can't hold the door for someone there. They're going to wonder what you're up to. Are you going to shank or shiv them? Saying
Now,
hi at the
I
post office.
I grew up in New York. That you do,
Some
you
people
can't.
are more immune to it than others. I've,
And
I've
then
noticed
that
that,
part
but I
that part
didn't
to know.
know how sensitive I was. And so I think a lot of the viewers may not know how much it's affected them, and how important
That
that
is
day to day
absolutely true.
interaction with the person at the grocery store or gas station, how that feeds your soul, and how we're all connected and we're
It's funny
suffering through
because
this.
there was really a misnomer when we got all this garbage. I was going to use a rougher word, that we're all in this together. There were people who were having trouble just paying their rent, just trying to make sure their kids had food to eat. And there were people whose jobs, I mean, we did a lot of telemedicine during this time, so we could still work and pay our rent. But I think that not everybody was all in it together. I think a lot of people felt abandoned during this time. Maybe they were angry about what went on. There certainly is a need to heal the divide that happened. And you and I spoke about this in other episodes of our podcast, that there seemed to be a divide in the country. Um, Hopefully, if there was an alien invasion, we would all band together, and maybe there was, I don't know, but
It's really interesting you brought that up, because I've thought a lot about that since we talked about that show. And one of the things the pandemic has taught me is fundamentally there are two types of people. People that are more driven by self-centeredness, and I don't mean for these words to come out as negative as they're going to sound, but ego, self-centeredness, self-awareness, self-preservation, what benefits them, which is important. Everyone needs skills like that and qualities like that that build confidence and so on. And then there are other people, the other type of person is driven more by their outwardly connection to others, their sense of connectedness to their community, the sense of well-being. And again, this concept came up when we had Dr. Goodman on the show about, you know, your attitudes towards social responsibility versus individual freedoms. I think that people tend to fall down on one side or the other. We don't spend a lot of time going back and forth, which is a topic for a show right now.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of sense of being mindful about it.
No.
You know, you think you're doing what you're told, and you think you're being virtuous when you may be hurting other people and you're not listening to them. That's on both sides of that coin. You know, people who believe in freedom think they're fighting freedom for everybody, and the people who believe in, you know, let's be socially responsible think that they're doing the same. Uh, and nobody's listening to each other. Nobody, you know, there's a lot of talking and not a lot of listening.
But the pandemic was an interesting
Was
external threat to expose the duality, or that you know, really inward versus outward. Some people are more inward directed, some more people, and I don't mean introvert extrovert.
And I think it exposed a lot of stuff. The other thing was whether you think for yourself or you rely on other people to tell you what to think. And once again, it goes on both sides of the aisle, both sides of the equation. Did you do your own homework or just relied on somebody to tell you what to do? So, you know, not the problem maybe, but the process of reintegration is you better start thinking for yourself. You better do your own homework. And one of the things that I always felt was, well, I had you to talk to. You know, I had a medical doctor that I could say, hey, what do you think about this? That, you know, getting your information either from Facebook or from some guy on TV is not the same as knowing someone and trusting them over time. You know, that they're going to think.
Sorry, I need to switch mugs.
Okay. Yeah. You know, somebody who actually knew what they were doing. Oh, where is that the one where, yeah, do not confuse your Google search with my medical degree. Oh,
The doctors know everything,
do not confuse your 1 hour of training in medical school with my 20 years of working with this information. Look, the bottom line is, it's who do you trust? And I just feel blessed that I have people that I can talk to and trust, and they do their own homework. So.
Well, likewise, I do too. And I feel better. I feel better already. Just talking about some tips and tricks and.
Yeah. So we're about to wrap up, and I got one thing to say. Go Bolts.
Oh, I thought you were going to say be well.
Oh, that too. Damn it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Go Bolts. I mean, be well. All right. Bye, everybody. We'll see you next week.
We'll see you next week. Stay out of the newspapers.
All right.